Fathers do something that's, I think, the most important in a family situation is they give the children an identity. Oftentimes when people are fatherless, they don't know who they are. We are essentially a fatherless generation. Hello, good people. Todd Shannon here. I have a hot take today. And that is, I think Vivek Ramaswamy might be the most important presidential candidate of our lifetime, certainly of the 21st century. You might say that's a little spicy, that's a little extreme, but I'm going to explain why. You see, every so often, someone comes around that kind of changes the game a little bit. For example, in basketball, right? Basketball has always selected out for tall people. But somebody figured out, you know what's even better than tall people? Tall people who are skilled. We didn't figure that out until someone came along who was really tall and really skilled. That guy's name is Magic Johnson, 6'9" point guard. Before him, there was never anyone like that. As a matter of fact, if you were 6'9", they typically just put you on the inside, told you to rebound and learn how to, do a little hook shot, and you didn't have to worry about dribbling the ball all that much. Magic Johnson shattered that stereotype that big guys couldn't be skilled. And then once we figured out that big guys could be skilled, most of the big guys didn't want to just sit on the block anymore, and it has yielded us kind of a whole new era of basketball where now the best players in the world are like really tall guys who are skilled. We call those people when they come along and kind of change the game, kind of change the paradigm, we call them prototypes. Now, interestingly enough, Vivek Ramaswamy doesn't have a singularly unique attribute. It's his combination of all the things that I'm going to talk about that I think makes him ideal as a prototype. And particularly with respect to someone in the GOP, someone who is conservative, I think that the GOP needs someone like Vivek Ramaswamy in order for us to take the next step forward. So I'm going to explain to you some of the things that I think that are really important about Vivek Ramaswamy that make him what I think is kind of the GOP prototype. We should be looking for a Vivek Ramaswamy-esque type candidate moving forward, even if Vivek ends up not panning out to be what we think he is or what we think he could be. First thing, Vivek is young. I don't think we understand how important that attribute is. Well, I think we are starting to understand it given the fact that our current president is like 100 years old, and he looks every bit 200 years old as far as his acumen, his mental acuity. He's just not all there. But more important than that, when you are young, you have a certain appeal to young people. And this is, I think, the most important thing that we have, I think, overlooked. I think we have allowed, or we have essentially ceded the ground of political ideology to the left. And all of the young, kind of exciting people tend to be on the left. We need a young candidate, someone who can communicate to young people. But even beyond that, we see how important it is that even beyond the presidential time in office, which is, if you're lucky or if you're fortunate, 8 years at the most, we need someone who can actually be influential beyond that. Really, Joe Biden is Barack Obama's third and fourth terms. If you think of it that way, you see the fact that Barack Obama was relatively young when he was elected president, and he still got many, many years to be impactful and influential in the party. And so, although Barack Obama couldn't serve a third and fourth term, through Joe Biden, he's effectively the puppet master. And this is important. And I'm not saying that someone who ends up being the president like Vivek Ramaswamy, someone who's young, should be kind of pulling the strings from behind the scenes. But what I am saying is that it is important to have someone who can be influential beyond their years in office. We see someone, for example, like George W. Bush. He couldn't get out of the spotlight quick enough. He's been irrelevant ever since he stepped foot out of office. I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. So we need someone who can be influential beyond their years in office. The second thing that's important about Vivek Ramaswamy He is independently wealthy. This is an important thing because we need someone in the White House who not only understands how to build a business, but is also not hostile towards enterprise in general. If you look at career politicians, they tend to think of themselves as kind of like saving themselves from the capitalist pigs, or they seem to think of themselves as the arbiters of justice by taking money from people who have earned it by creating valuable services and goods and giving it to people who don't deserve it. They seem to think that's their primary role. This obviously is not their actual role, but that's mainly because they've never built anything themselves. Barack Obama was a career politician. Joe Biden, career politician. They've never worked in the private sector. They've never built anything. This is bad. We need someone who's independently wealthy. And besides that, when you have your own money, you don't have to necessarily listen to some of the big donors who might want to control you. That money often comes with strings attached. And that's not to say that people who take money from donors can't be independent in their thinking. But there is kind of a, there's that thing that hangs over their head. So I would prefer that someone had their own money so that if they fell out of sorts with someone who was going to give them money for their campaign, they could tell them to kick rocks and just continue to do whatever they thought was right. The third thing that's really, really important is that this person must be a fantastic communicator of our ideals. This, in my opinion, is where Vivek Ramaswamy excels. This is what makes him different from everyone, not just in the GOP side, but on the Democrat side as well. He's the best communicator of ideas and values I have ever seen from the perspective of seeking the highest office in the land. And I want to give you an example of this because I don't think this can be overstated. Some time ago, Vivek Ramaswamy put this little 10 little rules, which he calls truth, or 10 principles, which he calls truth. Let's read them together. It says, 1, God is real. We need someone who believes that. Now, this is beyond the scope of this video. I know that Vivek Ramaswamy's version of God is not not the version of God that most of us in the United States believe in. That is the God of the Bible, the Christian God. I know he's not a Christian. That's beyond the scope of this particular video, but we at least need someone who understands that very sentiment and is not afraid to articulate it. 2, there are 2 genders. This would have been a non-controversial statement some years ago, but him saying that is important because it flies in the face of the current milieu, and for him to say it is actually an act of rebellion, which speaks to his fortitude. 3, human flourishing requires fossil fuels. 4, reverse racism is racism. We definitely need to hear that. 5, an open border is no border. 6, parents determine the education of their children. 7, the nuclear family is the greatest form of governance known to mankind. That statement, in my opinion, is the most powerful of all of these, besides the one where we say God is real. And it's really underrated. I don't have time to unpack it today, but that's an important one. 8, capitalism lifts people up from poverty. 9, there are 3 branches of government, not 4. And 10, the U.S. Constitution is the strongest guarantor of freedoms in history. Now, it actually doesn't matter if you think these are the most important 10, or if you particularly agree with everything that was said there, or whatever the situation is. What's important about that is how clear and concise his ideas are. He is saying them plainly so that anyone can understand them, from the most sophisticated to the simplest of American citizens. He communicates his ideas in a way that people understand. That's important. Our president can't just be some policy genius. I've said this before. We need someone who can communicate values, someone who is a leader in thought, someone who can teach and instruct. When we talk about the founding of our nation, the United States, we think about the people, we call them the founding fathers. And fathers do something very important. We talk about this a lot in the church. Fathers do something that's, I think, the most important in a family situation, is they give the children an identity. Oftentimes when people are fatherless, they don't know who they are. We are essentially a fatherless generation. not only in the family, actually in the home, but from a standpoint of general leadership more broadly. We need someone who is not afraid to say, this is who we are, and to be clear about that, and to craft policies and ideas, and to go about establishing those truths in such a way as to not equivocate, to not budge, and to not be pushed over by those who want to topple our values. Vivek Ramaswamy is the best communicator of values that I have seen. We don't need somebody who's just going to go in the back room and get policy pushed through the door without bringing the people along and having a national sense of pride and understanding what it means to be an American. Everybody else is out there saying things like, oh, the Democrats are bad. The Democrats say, oh, GOP is racist. Yeah, you're saying all of that stuff, but then they try to say, well, we're going to unify people by, just saying, hey, let's come together and try to work across the aisle. You cannot unify people until you communicate an idea that everyone can embrace and rally around. And so the unity is in the identity, and someone has to be able to be an expositor of those ideas in order to achieve it. So, once again, let's recap. He must be young, independently wealthy, a great communicator of ideas. And Vivek Ramaswamy is great at all of those things. So I'd like to know what you think. Do you think Vivek Ramaswamy, it doesn't really matter if he's not your guy, but do you agree that we need someone like him, someone in that mold on the conservative side of things in order to take that next step forward? I'd like to hear your thoughts, friends. Let me know in the comments if you disagree. Till next time, God bless you.